Welcome back to SoCap Talks. Today, I have the pleasure of sitting with two incredible women, Ann Liebman, who is the president of SoCap, as well as Kristen Blessman, who is the CEO of the Colorado Women's Chamber and all-around badass woman.
Wow.
Welcome.
Yes,
Kristen.
welcome. So happy to have you
Thank
here
you.
with us
I'm happy
today,
to be here.
Kristen.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So today we really want to focus on the topic which I know we're all really passionate about, which is women in business. But first, can you give us a little bit about your background and where you've been, where you're going, and where that passion comes from?
Sure. Wow. Well, I mean, I guess it's critical to say, starting out, I was raised by an incredibly strong and amazing mother. So that's sort of the beginning of my background, and a very supportive father as well that always told me I could do whatever I wanted to do. And at times, my mom didn't really always believe that, because in her experience for women that hadn't been the case. I think that she went as far as she could, and she was brilliant and worked really, really hard. But it was really my dad that gave me sort of that critical, nugget of information that told me I could do whatever I wanted to do. How far back do you want me to go?
Bring us on the journey. It's
Yeah.
fun.
Okay, cool. It's really interesting because I've been going on this journey myself a lot lately and kind of doing a lot of digging into my past to really get to know who I was a long, long time ago and where I am today. And it always makes me think of this really funny story when I was a Girl Scout. And I think I was probably about maybe in fifth or sixth grade. And it kind of helps shape my future of where I've gone and who I've become. And do you remember the badges? Remember the sashes that Girl Scouts had? So I wanted every single one of the badges on that sash. And I remember for a week solid, my mom would wake up in the middle of the night and I would still be awake at 4 a.m. doing all the writing and work to get all the badges on that sash. And so just kind of goes to show you that I'm probably a pretty motivated person when I see something in sight and I set my sights on it and I want to have whatever it takes to, have my eye on the prize. So I think that that's probably when I first realized that I was a pretty motivated person when I saw something that I wanted.
So did you end up getting all the badges?
Oh yeah,
Of course.
got every single one of them. Filled
then
my
some.
sash,
Right.
won the award, whatever that was. I can't remember, but I got it.
Yeah, you probably
So-
made up a couple of badges
Exactly.
of your own to stick on there.
So I guess that's sort of started my path, working around incredibly supportive and amazing women. And I always think about how funny that is, looking back on where I was and where I've come today to be with the Women's Chamber and around supportive women that want to help each other.
Yeah.
And so I didn't start my career in nonprofit because I had a bleeding heart, although I've had most of my career has been in nonprofit. And I always say that nonprofit sort of found me. And I worked at nonprofits with strong business models. So, large nonprofits that were sort of social enterprises, because I think that that's a good business model as opposed to solely relying on fundraising. Having something to offer in return was great. And so I worked in higher education, which is a great cause and I believe is transforming for so many people, especially women, because women are dominating higher education right now because it creates so many opportunities. And then after that, I became the chief marketing officer at Goodwill Industries of Denver, which, is one of the world's largest social enterprises.
Right.
And I say that nonprofit found me because I started out in marketing with the idea that it was great to market something as long as it was a good thing to market. And I really was drawn to Goodwill because it's a triple bottom line organization and they believed in people, profit, and planet, which I loved. And I didn't really know all the good things that Goodwill did, but once I found out and I got to market that, I was very, very hooked on working for organizations that did good with the profits that they made, which I think ultimately is what drew me to the Colorado Women's Chamber. I think that the landscape for women in business has come a long, long way. And I never forget about what that landscape used to be like for women like my mother. and how difficult it was, to even get to the top of the corporate chain for her, which at the time was being an executive assistant for a CEO at an ad agency, which is sort of interesting that I wound up in marketing and becoming a chief marketing officer. But her path was tough, and she shared some pretty difficult battle stories with me in order to just get that. Especially when I started at the Chamber of Commerce, she shared a lot with me about her past and what had happened to her along her career path. And so I think there's no more important mission for women in business right now to work alongside companies and other individuals that have a vested interest of advancing women in business, such as you all. So thank you for having me here, and thanks for promoting this.
Yeah. Question about your mom sharing her stories and her struggles to get to where she got. Did that have a discouraging effect on you? I imagine it had the opposite of more motivating.
I think for me, it was never discouraging. I never believed that I couldn't get what I wanted. And again, I think that came from my dad, always instilling. And I think that I had that hunger. We talk a lot at the Women's Chamber about this sort of DNA as women and what makes, women different, even like with other women,
Sure.
And that hunger, I always had that. I always wanted to succeed. I always wanted to do something that mattered and something that I loved. And then I had a son, and that made it even more so, right? I had that DNA of I want his life to be better than mine, so I'm going to work so hard to make that happen for him. So I never really truly believed that I couldn't have it all, although I would say that there was a certain little voice in my head that didn't believe that I could be a CEO, because that was reserved for men, in my family and in what I had seen.
Right.
That was never something that I thought I would have or seek out.
Very interesting. In the conversations we've had outside of this, you have talked about and kind of view yourself not only as a individual that loves to come in and turn around an entity, but also accelerate its growth. How are we going to do this? Not only utilizing the chamber, you've got a big mission there, but how do you see yourself playing a role in changing the path for women in general?
Well, I think the great thing about the Chamber of Commerce is that you have large businesses on your side. And I think now more than ever, I've seen firsthand from our members not joining the chamber just to check a box. In fact, if that was their only reason for joining before, they're not joining as a result. I think that the companies that we have on board now are truly, honestly working to advance women in business. I think whether it's a male or female at the top, I think everybody has a vested interest in helping women advance. And I think that how we play a role in that is that, first of all, we learn from men. I mean, Devin and Ann, you and I have talked about that a lot. Still, to this day, it's mostly men at the top. Only 14% of CEO positions are held by women. So we have to partner with men and learn how they do it. And I think we also have to do a little work on ourselves and figure out what's holding us back. Why aren't we going for those leadership roles, not just CEO, but all leadership roles? Why aren't we growing our businesses at the same rate as men? What's going on? Again, there's certain gender bias and cultures that are holding us back, but it's also ourselves, and we have to really look at that. And that's what we're doing at the Women's Chamber, and not just us doing it, but partnering with our members to navigate real change.
What are some of those other stats that you shared with us that are, I don't want to call them concerning, but
Sure.
that we need to focus on and really shift?
So in Colorado, 86% of women-owned businesses have only one employee. And so that hasn't changed in decades, and that's according to the census data. So there's something going on there. I've asked many, many questions when I hear female panelists talk about why that stat is. And I think that what I've heard is there's definitely some unconscious bias going on, especially in the VC world. There's been some studies where women pitch the exact same pitch as a man, and they've done it over and over and over again with different women, different men, but same exact pitch. And the men always get it and the women never do. So there's definitely some bias going on, and I don't think it's conscious bias. I think it's unconscious bias. And I also think, again, what we spoke about before, it's that, something in us. I've spoken to some of our small business members that have this comfort level of keeping their business where it is and not wanting to grow it, and there's this definite perception. And quite honestly, it was the same perception that I had when thinking about taking a CEO role, that if you grow your business too big, or you take a CEO leadership role, that is going to completely change your life. You're going to have to give up everything, which is very important to women, right? We want to be there for our family. We want to be good mothers. We want to have time to work out. We want to have time to travel. And there is this perception that we won't have those opportunities if we grow. And so those things need to change by women modeling it and doing it. And certainly there are great role models here in Colorado that we can learn from. Another statistic that I talk about all the time is that Colorado's 47th in the nation for a number of women on publicly traded boards. And, the way that we look at that as the Women's Chamber is that's sort of the highest level of leadership. That's even above a CEO role, and getting those is very coveted. So I think that, at the Women's Chamber, we really look at creating that pipeline of female leaders to prepare us to get those board seats, because you have to plan your career around that. Oftentimes, a company will have the requirement just to sit on their board at all that you have to be a CEO. Well, I just told you the stats for CEOs that are women. So if you're not a CEO, you're not going to get on that publicly traded board. And I think, again, perhaps we could look at, what that culture is on a board that's asking for people to be CEOs, because certainly there's a wealth of knowledge at that C-suite level that you could encourage to be on your board. But also, again, we have to encourage women to want to take on those roles.
So let's talk about, there's the obvious systemic issues and those unconscious bias. But I think it'd be important for everybody listening now to really understand what they can do. In your work that you're doing, what can women do to get out of their own way?
Well, I think certainly, surrounding themselves with other women that have that growth mentality. I always talk about the Women's Chamber as far as our membership and who's in it and women will appreciate this, and men too, as surrounding yourself with a bunch of those girlfriends that tell you sometimes what you don't want to hear, right? I always talk about the girlfriend that I have that, is always one of those women that said, I told you shouldn't date him, or I told you shouldn't do that, or here's what I think. And sometimes we don't like to hear that. But I think surrounding yourself with other women that have that mindset, they're going to tell you how to grow and how to navigate it and to listen to it is really, really important. I think getting mentorship and sponsorship is critical, and not just from women, from men too. I always say that it took a man to plant the seed and tell me that I could be a CEO. And I can't say his name enough because it was really a monumental time in my career. Stuart Davey, the CEO at Goodwill, was sort of, I call it the handing me the chalk. Have you guys, I think I told you that story of Hidden Figures. Kevin Costner hands the chalk to the main character that's been, clamoring to speak in a meeting, and he finally gives her the chalk. Stuart was the one that gave me the chalk and said, you can definitely do this. And of course, my self-talk came forward and said, I can't do that. I'm a single mom. How am I going to pick up my son? How am I going to do all these things? And he kind of, awkwardly said, I have no idea. I'll get you a female mentor for that, but I will give you the skill set and teach you the things that you need to know to be a CEO. So again, I think, that mentorship and sponsorship, surrounding yourself with a good peer group that's going to support your growth is critical. And that's one of the things that the Colorado Women's Chamber provides. But certainly there are many organizations and many groups that provide that.
Yeah, you talk about the support, the mentorship, the surrounding yourself with those people. And you said before, the balance is what so many women struggle with. Like, I can't do that because I have to do this. How is it all going to work? Getting the workout in, picking up the kids from school. Right. So how did you figure out that balance as you were moving into a CEO position that you didn't think was ever going to happen?
Right. So do you think that this is true? And maybe this is just me, but I think women are perfectionists.
Oh, yes.
Right? So we want to be perfect at everything. And so we want to be the perfect mom. We want to be the perfect friend. We want to be there for our family, work out as much as possible. I need to shed the last few pounds. I have to eat healthy this week. And truthfully, it's just not possible. And the way that I navigate my self-talk, and this is something that I came up with just on my own, is well, I shouldn't say I came up with it on my own. I have a great coach who's a male, actually, and is really good at helping with my self-talk. And one of the things that he's had me work on is prioritizing the things that I hold near and dear, and the areas of my life that are critical to me and important to me. And there's 5 areas, and I write down goals every week in those areas. And so their career, friends and family, all the things that you'd expect, right? Financial, spiritual, health and fitness. And I write down goals every week, and I usually hit, never perfection, but I usually accomplish about 2 areas every week. Mm-hmm. So when I'm looking back on what I set forth to do, fully accepting that I'm only going to do well in 1 or 2, and then the next week I just pick up again and say, okay, I didn't do so well in these areas, so I'm going to focus on those next week. So for example, some weeks I'll really kill it at work, and I'll have an amazing week at work, and I'll close business or accomplish something great at the chamber. And oftentimes what happens is I haven't been the best mother that week because I'm doing a lot of events and working at night. And so I pick up the next week. This is a week with my son. Yep. So this week I'm going to focus on him and be there for him. So,
going back to your childhood, the analogy of the badges on the sash,
right.
Each week is ever evolving of which badges you're going to get on the sash, and that's okay.
Yeah, or if you get all the badges on your sash one week, you better take care of yourself next week and get some sleep.
Yeah. Good call.
The self badge.
Yeah.
So there was a mentor of mine that was a spiritual leader back when I was 21, 22, and I don't have a perfection thing, but I had a people-pleasing thing. Mm-hmm. And I see them very much aligned in terms of the decisions we make and the self-talk that we have to have. Right. And this gentleman sat me down one day and he goes, Devin, I can relate. I spent my life wanting to please everybody, and I felt like I couldn't please anybody. And the day that changed is the day that one of his mentors sat him down and, and said, it isn't about who you can please, it's about who you're going to piss off today. And know and be okay with the fact that if you need to go do this work with this individual over here, others will be upset.
Right.
Because they don't get your time. That just means you're special and people want to spend more time with you. And I'm not always that special, but nonetheless, I feel blessed and honored. But at the same time, they need to be upset, and I need to be okay with pissing those people off so I can really focus my energy where it needs to be today. But then when it's that person's turn who was pissed off at me today, when it's their turn tomorrow, they're happy.
Yeah.
Same kind of application here in this perfection space. And I think, there are men that I encounter that have a desire to be a perfectionist, and it's very goal oriented. And then I think a lot of women have a perception of being perfect or needing things to be perfect, but it's out of a completely different space. It's out of the space of safety and security.
Right.
And it's really interesting when, in the dating space where I used to play, it was a lot of unanimous conversation around, I don't care where we're going on the date, just tell me give me an idea of what we're doing so I know what to wear, right? And it's not that they need to look perfect, it's the idea that if I don't know, I won't be in the perfect outfit, and then I'll feel insecure in that moment. And I think a lot of that is just coded in your DNA to need to feel secure. And it's really interesting how that translates into things like everything needs to be perfect.
Right.
And I wonder, and from your perspective, both Ann and Kristen, how can you create, because all of it seems like it'd be a false sense of security anyways.
Right. It is.
What do you do to really minimize that core need of security and really jump in and take risks? Like you took a risk to jump into entrepreneurship, and you have taken a risk in moving from the CMO of Goodwill to taking on a CEO position. Yeah. How did you get past that safety and security?
Well, first of all, and I've heard many women leaders say this. Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge what you said about having the same feelings, but it coming from a different place, because I think that that's absolutely true. I think men and women experience the same emotions, experience the same fears, but they manifest differently. And so I think that that's something that, as we move forward and begin to talk about, men and women working together to advance women in business, having those conversations and hearing that and the motivations will be really transforming moving forward, because what it does is it gets men to understand, what women are dealing with. And then it also allows them to take it a step further and help and coach and help navigate, both for men and women. So thank you for acknowledging that. The other thing about risk is that I've spoken to a lot of women about this. We talked about this in one of our roundtable discussions. We have a corporate women's group that gets together every other month and talks about, what's it going to take for us to advance, or what are the things holding us back. And so I've heard the different dynamics, and I hear a lot of mothers talking about this, right? Some, choose to stay home and re-enter the workforce, which they don't realize it at the time, but there's a certain amount of risk associated with that. They don't know it's a risk until later when they come back in, but it is a risk. And then the ones that jump in and just do it anyway. We're both dealing with the same thing. We're both taking huge risks. So how do you change it? You just do it.
Yeah.
And then you figure it out.
That's right.
And you will. And so I think, again, the more women we see take these risks and do it, the more that we'll have someone to look up to, someone to role model after, because it has worked for them and they can see how it's navigated. Because I think for women, and I might be wrong, it's a calculated risk. When I took the job at the chamber, I didn't think about it. I had a mentor that sent me the job, and I said, okay, she sent it to me. She's my mentor. She's holding me accountable. I can't let her down. I got to apply, and I have to try. And then I got the job, and I remember the night before I started, I was crying to a friend saying, I don't know how I'm going to do this. What am I doing? I always talk about, I'm a single mom. Am I still going to be able to be there for my son? This is crazy. It's fear. And so, of course, and then, lo and behold, I jumped in, and it certainly had its challenges. And then I discovered a great gift about myself. And like you said, I have a gift for turnaround and change. I'm drawn to it, and I think I'm pretty good at it.
You are.
Definitely. Yes. I think another factor, and we talk about it quite a bit, men and women being different in a lot of ways, and one of them being just how our brains work and how we're wired. Women have spaghetti brains, and that's one of the beautiful, amazing things about us, is that we're firing on all cylinders at all times, and we're thinking about every single little detail and every single little thing, and men just don't think like that. They are very much one thought at a time, and I know, Devin, you have certain terms for how all that works, but in terms of women, it's an awesome thing, but it also can be limiting, because of then the fears kick in, and we're thinking of every possible situation and every possible way something could go. And so then that makes it harder for us to take the leap, make the jump, take the risk, because there's too many thoughts telling us not to, for various reasons. So I think a big part of how I was able to finally make the big jump and continue to make jumps and take risks, and it sounds like you too, is just not necessarily shutting off all of the ways our brain is going, but just focusing in and listening to the ones that are telling us to do that one jump.
Right.
And I think that's really important. And then, of course, that night when you were crying before your first day, then they're all firing again, but you already made the decision, and then you figure it out. And I think that's really important, just to acknowledge that our brains are just different, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
At the same time that it's limiting. So we just have to figure out how to work them to the best of our advantage to make those big moves and strides.
Yeah. That's so interesting that you bring that up, because I do think that, men don't think that way. And I do think that it helps them a lot. And I've gotten a lot of coaching on this, that, probably 90% of the things that are at the end of the spaghetti aren't real. Right. And so I've had to do a lot of work. I don't know if you experience this too, Anne, but the 4 a.m. wake up of, oh my God. And, just it's the spaghetti tendrils going, right? Oh, what about this? Or, oh my gosh, what did I do there? And
what if this happens when it didn't even happen yet?
I know. And it's not real. It's not real. And so, and then you wake up several hours later and you go, what was I thinking? None of that is even valid or real. And so what I've learned to acknowledge is just let it pass through, but no, so much of this is just you, making up reasons or things that just aren't real, and to just remember that.
Yeah. It's the overthinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the ways when I was coaching women around the world that I supported them in just understanding the differences between how your mind works versus ours. Take meditation or yoga as an example. Movement is a woman's mind's best friend. Action is a woman's mind's best friend. And it is so genetically coded. I mean, I use the loose historical example of thousands upon thousands of years ago, women were moving all the time in tribe, and men occasionally got up to hunt, occasionally would protect the tribe, but most of the time we were sitting around strategically planning for something that may or may not ever happen.
Yeah.
And we were sitting in council. And when you look at the desire for men to have men caves, it's because we need to get away and be still. Mm-hmm. When I've worked with men around meditation, they have an easier time checking into that nothing box.
Cool.
And being and silencing the mind. It's much, much harder for the woman's mind because of what we're talking about, where all the wires cross.
Yeah.
I forget the exact interpretation, but it's for every thought per se that women have 16 points of reference firing at the same time, men have 9. So we almost have half of the amount of activity happening in the brain, not because we're slower or dumber, although sometimes it seems that way. But you guys, from the dawning of time, have been taking care of the grandkids while taking care of your children, while pleasing the man, while building the thing and helping with you're just doing everything. And so for you, motion shuts the mind down. Yes. And when you need to make a decision, very important decision, should I take that job as an example? Go do an activity, go exercise, then ask yourself that question, and don't listen to the mind, listen to the feeling. And this is where you have so much power. It's why I believe women will be the greatest leaders. And no matter what your historical reference is, when you do look at history, when women were in positions of leadership, they made very unique, powerful decisions. Because if they were too busy to give a shit, they would make the right decision all the time. It's when you sit around and try and contemplate the way a man does in a man's world, unfortunately today or previous to, you don't work the same way. You don't work out of silence. You work out of motion.
That's so cool too. You know, we had a speaker, and I'll credit her because she's amazing. Dr. Anita Mosby Tyler owns an organization called the Equity Project, and she was talking about the idea that the system, the corporate system, was created for white men. Not good or bad. It's just the simple truth, right? So if it was created to be conducive to the conditions that you just spoke about, then it's going to be conducive to the way that that mind works. And it's so true, you know, and when you put it that way, it makes so much more sense for why you'd need to take a break in the middle of the day as a female leader and go for a run or go to yoga or just sometimes get out and walk around. Another interesting point that you made, and I wonder about this, is I've heard it said a lot that women are great leaders, but they lack that vision and that strategy. And I wonder if that has something to do with it, right? Because we're used to, you know, multitasking and being busy and moving, and we don't often take the times to be strategic and to be visionary, yet we definitely know how to do it. And I wonder if there's something to that lack of movement, and our ability to just calm the mind a bit and really laser focus in on what we want to be strategic about, because we can be very strategic. And I know when my mind is calm, and you said it perfectly, after a run, if my spaghetti tendrils are going crazy and I go for a run, I'm totally calm. I'm in my best space ever right after that, or after a really intense yoga class, or you know, it really does help. And I'm glad you brought that up, but I wonder how that plays into our ability to be strategic.
I think it plays a huge role, and it probably also plays a role into vision, right? You get into that runner's high, you're going to see a lot further in your mind as to the capability of who you really are. And you're going to find that vision from your heart. You're not going to find that vision from the synapses firing in your brain, recalling past, right?
Right.
And so I think just being in movement and pushing yourself so that your body and your mind exhausts itself, then tapping into that heart space is where you're going to find vision. It's also where you're going to find strategy, and it's also going to be where you make your best decisions.
Right.
And I would say regarding corporate structure, as we're wrapping this up, I'd love to have a couple bullet points of what you've learned that would be great takeaways. And the one thing that I would challenge these incredible women leaders across the board is to not look at the archaic system that we're functioning in. We're still functioning in this industrial mindset when it comes to the way we do business, the way we create business plans, the way we pitch to raise funds. My personal preference is fuck it all, do something completely different. Bring something completely new to the table. How does your business model look? Is it a matter of taking a break every hour and doing yoga and getting into movement for all of the women and allowing the men to go take a tribal timeout, right? Like, I don't know what it looks like, but it doesn't need to come from my mind.
Yeah.
It needs to be reinvented because I'm not sold that the way we're doing it today is anything other than archaic, and
Well,
it needs
it's
to
not
change.
working.
It's not working.
Yeah. So I didn't know we were allowed to cuss in this. So
Totally.
I should have known that.
I should have warned you
Rewind.
ahead of time.
I know, I love it. All those studies that say you're intelligent if you cuss. Yeah, I fall into that category. I
It
have
just
to
makes us feel
warn-
better
I
about
have
doing
to
it.
warn people that work with me that I like to drop F-bombs a lot. So when they're like, oh, that they're not threatened by it, it just sometimes feels really good.
It does.
You're right, and the system isn't working. I mean, if it was working, then the statistics would be different, and they're not. They're changing, and I think that as women begin to get in more leadership roles, they will continue to change. But the latest McKinsey & Company study said that it's going to take women 107 years to catch up to where men are in the workplace. So is that what we want to see? That's the current pace of change. So that's not working.
Yeah.
It's not good enough. And so I do think that we have to look at systematic change to make things happen. How we do that, I don't have the answer. I know what's holding us back, and I have that data. And I think what we're looking to do now is really have conversations about, let's listen to women. Let's listen to men. We know what's causing it. Okay, now let's have the conversation of what we think needs to change. I've spoken with some leaders locally that have talked about hard skills. Let's give women some more of those hard skills, kind of some of the things that you were talking about that men possess. Let's kind of, and not acting like men, but how can women obtain those skills in the way that they need to lead a little bit differently. I want to start listening to those, sort of maverick thinkers and start trying some of those things out and not being afraid to try something new. And if it fails, that's okay. We have a lot of companies coming to the table that are willing to open up all of their data. Denny Post, with the CEO of Red Robin, has been leading this charge, and she said, hey, I'll give you all the salary data on my organization, everything. If you think it will help make change and get more women into leadership positions and on boards, then let's do it. And so we have a lot of those organizations that are willing to do that and open up their doors to us just to try and make change, and not being afraid as a publicly traded company to say, hey, sorry, my bad, I guess we weren't doing this right, and being
Right.
okay that that's reported because they want to change it.
Yeah. So to wrap it up, what is your vision?
What is my vision? Wow. Well, first of all, my vision is to partner with our members and individuals in the community that care about this, and really truly look at the Women's Chamber as a nonprofit with a business model that's seeking to be a business that makes a profit, but it is 100% focused on making those changes. I want to see more women in CEO roles. I want to see those small businesses grow and for those statistics to change. And we're going to begin measuring it. So even if it's not a pretty picture, and we're seeing that our small businesses have 86% have one employee, we're going to measure it every year, and hopefully it will change. But if it doesn't, then we're going to try something new. And so my vision is that we're going to create programs, we're going to create curriculum, we're going to raise awareness with every event that we do, and we're going to see these statistics change.
Yes, we are. What's your vision, Ann, out of curiosity?
I mean, I love everything that Kristen has been saying, and I think just this is firsthand seeing what it is going to take somebody like you and more women like you and driving change and really making it a reality versus just talking about it and what could be done, actually making it happen. So in terms of my big vision, 107 years is not okay. I think, especially in Colorado, I mean, I believe we had said at our last meeting that the Colorado Women's Chamber is the biggest in the nation, correct?
We think it's the largest.
We think it's the largest. So, I mean, that's something right there. I think we're in a good spot in Denver as a whole with the entrepreneurial spirit and the technology and the startups, and so many people are owning their own businesses, lots of them being women. What a perfect place to exercise this change and the drive forward and to actually see it come to life. We already are that big spot on the map in terms of the size of, for example, the Women's Chamber. I think we just keep building off of that and see what happens. But yeah, cutting that time frame down by a lot, I think is going to be huge and doable with people like you, and the vision and the mission and the values behind it all. I think is going to be really exciting to see.
Well, thanks, and thanks for being a member. And when I think about SoCap's business model and what you're doing, it will be so amazing to witness the growth that you experience and study how you're doing it, right? Because it's you and Devin and Eric really partnering with different unique leadership capabilities, and you at the helm is going to be really incredible to watch your growth. So we need to start looking at you all and studying what you're doing, and hopefully we can teach other organizations how you're all doing it to grow.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. We will.
Cool. Okay.
Well, I appreciate your time, and I got to say on behalf of all great men, thank you, and we love you, and we are behind you.
Thanks so much. That brings tears to my eyes. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kristen.
Thanks.